This is Chapter 6 of The Dreamer by Muñoz, and it's Pinecone. Naphtali heard Father's boots pounding up the steps. He lowered his book and waited, hoping that he would not be summoned. The boots tramped through the house and, as he suspected, the whistle blasted. Naphtali closed his eyes, wincing. Why couldn't he be left alone to read? Since the visit to the forest a month ago, Naphtali had avoided Father and spent every free moment hidden away in his room, consumed by the books of Jules Verne. Naphtali reluctantly put down Journey to the Center of the Earth. Instead of hurrying, though, he walked slowly and deliberately. He found Father pacing in the salon. "You need to come promptly, Naphtali. What were you doing?" "Reading, Father." "You are nothing more than a brittle twig," he barked, "and this obsession with books will not make you vigorous. Have we not talked about this time and again? Do you want to be a scatterbrain for the rest of your life?" No, Father." "You need to be outside instead of squandering good weather. Now run and play with the other boys, and none of your diversions. Join the games and let them make a man of you." With Father watching, Naphtali headed outside. He put his hands in his pockets and meandered down the road toward the boys who were playing football. Ahead, Larita's friend Valeria and her older sister Blanca walked toward them. Blanca often escorted Valeria to the house to play with Larita. Although Naphtali had never admitted it to anyone, he secretly thought Blanca was kind and pretty. Seeing her now, even from a distance, made him blush. As the two girls drew closer, Naphtali stared at the ground. "Hello, Naphtali," said Blanca. For the briefest moment, he looked up and then back down. His heart pounded. Blanca had smiled at him. He wanted to answer, but his throat felt so tight he could barely swallow. He kept his chin pressed to his chest and continued walking. After a dozen steps, he glanced back to make sure they had disappeared down the road, and then he blew out a deep breath. What was wrong with him that he couldn't say hello in return? Had Blanca thought him a fool? Would she ever speak to him again? To calm himself, he inspected the remnants of a recent storm. He loitered over the oily colors of street puddles, rust-colored and green, like Blanca's hair and eyes. He inspected the frazzled strips of bark dangling from a tree, like Blanca's flowing skirt. He admired the newly arrived pebbles that had settled on the side of the road, their faces as smooth as a pool of cream, like Blanca's skin. Naphtali. Had someone whispered his name? He stood and turned around. Nearby, Rodolfo kicked a ball back and forth to Guillermo, the new boy from school. Guillermo was just a year older than Naphtali, but was the same size as the much older Rodolfo. The burly athlete had been at their school only a few weeks, and he had already been in a number of fights. Naphtali hoped that, like so many, he and his family would stay a few months in Tomoko and then move on. Naphtali. There it was again! Had Rodolfo called to him? Did he want Naphtali to join their game? He ran toward them. Seeing him, Guillermo yelled, "Shinbone, Shinbone, do not let him play!" He and Rodolfo looked only at the ball being passed between them, as if Naphtali was invisible. So it had not been Rodolfo calling his name. Who was it then? Naphtali searched from one end of the street to the other, but saw no one looking his way. Maybe Father was right. Maybe he was a scatterbrain. He looked down and saw a long stick just the right length for dragging and picked it up. He turned back toward home. When he arrived in his backyard, he wrote on the earth, "I am here." Naphtali studied the house from his bedroom window, where he often stood to gaze at the hole in the fence. Then he turned and walked to the corner of the yard. Where was the opening? He cleared away the brambles until he found the spot, now jammed with leaves and mud. With a stick, he poked and scraped until the gap was clear. Then he crouched down and peered to the other side. Next door, the flowers bowed their heads toward one another. The trees reached out in leafy embraces. Even the thistles clumped together like old friends. As usual, though, the portal revealed nothing more than another weed-choked yard. A prickly sensation washed over him, and the hair stood up on his arms. He sensed a presence and thought he heard a small intake of breath. He pulled back. After a few moments, he peeked through again, still nothing. Had he wished so hard for someone to be there that he had imagined a ghost? Suddenly, the hand of a child darted through the hole and disappeared. Naphtali jerked away, his heart thumping. The hand reappeared and nudged a toy sheep through the gap. Naphtali picked it up. The wheels on the sheep that had once rolled were gone. The wool was matted and yellowed. But Naphtali did not care. There was someone on the other side. His thoughts toppled. Was it someone new to Tomoko? Or someone from the street? The desire to give something back overwhelmed Naphtali, but what could he offer? What could he pass through the hole in the fence that was as remarkable? He raced into the house to his room and then back outside. Breathless, Naphtali laid his offering in the opening to the stranger's world. He heard a gasp of appreciation and watched the hands lift the pine cone away. Naphtali looked through the hole but could not see anyone. He heard only the thudding of retreating footsteps, the clumping of footfalls on the wooden stairs, and a swollen door yelping shut. Was the child shy, too? Was he or she waiting for Naphtali to be the first to say hello? Clutching the sheep, he hurried to the front yard and hid beneath the sprawling bush, watching the house next door. No one went in or came out. He stroked the sheep and waited. Still no one came. Finally, he crossed into the neighboring yard. Taking one shaky step, then another, he climbed the uneven wooden steps. His mouth felt dry. Would he be able to speak without stuttering? His hands perspired, and his clothes felt as if they were much too small. He hesitated. What if the child was like Guillermo? Naphtali reassured himself that someone so generous could not be cruel. He stretched out his hand and knocked. At his touch, the door creaked open. He took a few steps inside. The bare floors were interrupted only by discarded boxes, spider webs, and the occasional animal dropping. As Naphtali wandered through the house long deserted, his footsteps echoed on the wooden floors, the sound hollow and empty. The giver could have been anyone in the world. What grows in the dark soil of disappointment? As the seasons changed, the sheep became Naphtali's devoted companion. In the fall, he buried his head in its wool to protect himself from the boys at school, who chased him and pelted him with acorns. During the winter rains, Naphtali read aloud to the sheep, and together they traveled to distant worlds. In the spring, when he should have been studying his mathematics, he sat with him in a wild apple tree at the banks of the river Katyn, daydreaming. And when summer bloomed yellow hot and the family prepared for a trip to the sea, the sheep sat on top of Naphtali's belongings, waiting to be packed. For weeks, all Father had talked about was his great summer plan. Naphtali was excited, too, but something about Father's overzealous enthusiasm pried a tiny splinter of doubt from his mind. Naphtali reached for his sheep and pulled it close. He whispered, "Do not worry, amigo. I will protect you." I am poetry, prowling the blue, tempting my prey, with fish, shell, and sky. From beneath the eyelids of the deep, I seek the unsuspecting heart. Look at me. And that's the end.